Welcome to my channel. Subscribe and enjoy my new stories every day. When Abigail first started spending more late nights at the office, I didn't think much of it. She had been talking about her career ambitions for months, excitedly sharing with me every milestone, every challenge she faced at work. I was genuinely happy for her. After all, we had built our relationship on trust, on mutual support, and I prided myself on being the kind of husband who encouraged his wife's success. The long hours, the work trips, none of it bothered me. Until recently, that week, things felt off. Abigail wasn't just working late. She had become distant, secretive in ways that didn't sit well with me. She dodged simple questions like, "What did you have for lunch?" or "Who are you meeting with?" and brush it off with a quick, "Just work stuff, nothing important." The tone in her voice seemed forced, like she was giving me the version of her life she thought I wanted to hear. But the real blow came out of nowhere. It was a Friday night. Abigail came home, late as usual, but something about her demeanor was different. She seemed lighter, relieved almost, like a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. Over dinner, she casually dropped the news, "I got the promotion." I was genuinely thrilled for her at first. "That's incredible, babe. You've been working so hard, you totally deserve it." But something gnawed at me. The promotion came too quickly. Just a week ago, she was complaining about office politics and how her boss, Robert, was stringing her along with vague promises. She said she wasn't sure she'd get it anytime soon. But now, suddenly, everything had changed. She didn't offer any details, just smiled and nodded as I praised her accomplishment. It was as if she didn't want to talk about it. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. My mind raced, connecting the dots I had previously ignored. The extra late nights, the texts she guarded, her increasing aloofness. Was it possible? No, I shook off the thought. I wasn't the paranoid type. Abigail loved me. We'd been through so much together. Still, the doubt was there, gnawing at me like a slow poison. The following Monday, I decided to surprise her. I called her office, wanting to congratulate her again and maybe take her out to lunch to celebrate. When I dialed her direct number, she didn't pick up. I tried again. Still nothing. After a few minutes, my phone buzzed. Abigail was calling back. "Hey, babe," she said, her voice unusually tense. "Sorry, I'm swamped. Can we talk later?" I tried to sound casual. "Just wanted to check in. How's everything at the office? You sound off." There was a pause, then a strange laugh, almost forced. "No, everything's fine. It's just work, you know. Same old grind." I could feel my heart rate pick up. Something was definitely wrong. Before I could press her further, I heard a male voice in the background, deep and authoritative. "Give me that," he said, and before I knew it, someone else was on the line. "Listen, pal," the man said, his tone mocking. "Abigail's no longer your woman. She belongs to me now." He chuckled, then hung up. I stood there, frozen, the phone still pressed to my ear, listening to the dial tone. My heart dropped into the pit of my stomach, anger quickly bubbling up to the surface. Couldn't be true. There had to be some kind of mistake. I dialed her number again, no answer. I tried her cell phone, straight to voicemail. Panic set in. I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my veins, my mind racing with a million thoughts. Who the hell was that? Her boss? Robert? What the hell was happening? I grabbed my jacket and keys, my mind set on one thing. I was going to confront her. I needed answers, and I needed them now. I drove to her office, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. My head swam with anger, betrayal, confusion. Was this really happening? After all these years? When I pulled into the parking lot of her building, it was nearly empty. Most of the office had cleared out for the evening. I stormed inside, heading straight to the elevator that would take me to her floor. The ride up felt like it lasted forever, my heart pounding in my chest. When the doors opened, I stepped out, scanning the quiet hallway. Her office door was closed. I knocked once, then again, harder this time. No answer. I grabbed the handle and shoved it open, stepping inside. The room was empty. Papers were scattered across her desk. Her bag hung on the back of her chair, but she was nowhere to be found. I clenched my fists, pacing the room, my mind in overdrive. And then it hit me. The signs had been there all along. The long nights, the secrecy, the coldness. Abigail wasn't just climbing the corporate ladder. She was sleeping with the man who held the strings. Suddenly, everything clicked into place. Robert, her boss. The sudden promotion. The arrogant voice on the phone. It wasn't just work that kept her at the office all these nights. I could almost picture it, her, in his arms, laughing at my stupidity. I felt rage bubble up inside me. I grabbed my phone and sent her a single text, "We need to talk." Now, I didn't get a response. Not that night and not the next day. That's when I knew. She wasn't coming home. Abigail had made her choice. And it wasn't me. I sat in the darkness of our living room that night, staring at the walls, imagining all the ways I could get back at her. How I could make her regret ever betraying me. She didn't deserve to just walk away unscathed. No, she would feel the same pain, the same humiliation. She had broken me, and I was going to break her. And so, I began to plan my revenge. It was only the beginning. Couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Abigail with him, Robert. His smug voice still echoed in my mind, taunting me. The realization that she had been lying to me, betraying everything we had built together, was a knife twisting deeper with each passing second. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. The next morning, I woke with a single thought: confrontation. I didn't care what she had to say. I didn't care if she tried to spin some ridiculous story. I just needed to look her in the eye, to see the truth on her face and deliver my own truth in return. She would regret this. By noon, my phone buzzed with a text from Abigail. "Let's talk tonight. I'll be home after work." Work. The word itself was a joke now. She didn't even bother to hide behind any more excuses. There was no, "Oh, I'll explain everything." No apology, no attempt to make things right. Just a cold, calculated message, as if she wasn't about to face the consequences of ruining everything. I sat there, the anger simmering inside me, 1,000 scenarios playing out in my head. What would I say? How far was I willing to go? The image of her walking through the door, her lips curling into that same fake smile she had used on me for weeks, it made my blood boil. By the time the clock struck 7, I was sitting in the living room, waiting. Every sound from outside made my pulse race. I could feel the tension building, my heart thudding in my chest. Then, I heard the key turn in the lock. The door opened, and there she was. Abigail stepped inside, dressed in her professional work attire, her hair perfectly done. She looked normal, as if nothing had changed. It was that nonchalance that drove me over the edge. How could she act like everything was fine? Like she hadn't shattered my world? "Hey," she said, barely glancing at me as she set her purse down. "I didn't get to eat today. I'll grab something from the fridge, and then we can talk." She walked into the kitchen, acting as though this was just another evening, as if her entire betrayal hadn't come crashing down around us. My fists clenched as I watched her open the fridge and pull out some leftovers. Her movements calm, too calm. I couldn't take it anymore. "Who the hell do you think you are?" I blurted out, my voice breaking the stillness of the room like a hammer. "You think we're just going to sit here and have a little chat over dinner? Like nothing's happened." She paused, her hand gripping the fridge door. Slowly, she turned to face me, her eyes narrowing. "What are you talking about, Jack?" I stood up from the couch, my whole body trembling with rage. "Don't play dumb, Abigail. I talked to Robert." Her expression shifted, barely. There was a flicker of something, surprise maybe, but she recovered too quickly. "Robert? What does he have to do with this?" "He took your phone." I snapped, taking a step toward her. "He took your phone and told me that you're his now. Is that what this is? A game? You and your boss screwing around behind my back?" She stared at me, and for the first time I saw it. Guilt. It flashed in her eyes, just for a second, but it was there, undeniable. "Jack, it's not what you think," she began, her voice soft, almost too soft. She set down the plate of leftovers and walked over to me, her hands outstretched as if she could calm me with a touch. "Let me explain." "Explain what?" I cut her off, stepping back, out of her reach. Explain how you've been lying to me for God knows how long. How you've been sneaking around with your boss while I sat here like an idiot, supporting your career, believing in you. It's not that simple, she said, her voice cracking. I didn't want to hurt you. It just happened. Don't give me that bullshit, I shouted. Things like this don't just happen. You made a choice. Every night you chose to go to him, to betray me. She opened her mouth to respond, but no words came out. For the first time, she looked cornered, like she had no way out. I could see the cracks forming, her defenses crumbling. I loved you, Abigail, I said, my voice shaking with emotion. I gave you everything, and this is how you repay me? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't care. I didn't feel sorry for her. She didn't deserve my pity, not after what she had done. Jack, I'm sorry, she whispered, finally breaking down. I didn't mean for this to happen. Save it, I snapped, cutting her off again. You don't get to apologize. Not after you've destroyed everything. She took a step closer, her face pleading. Please, Jack, we can fix this. I can fix this. I'll end things with Robert, You think I want you after this? I shouted, my voice echoing off the walls. You think I'm just going to forget that you've been sleeping with your boss and pretending everything's fine? Her tears flowed freely now, but I didn't care. All I saw was betrayal, a black void where trust used to be. I turned away from her, pacing, my mind racing with thoughts of revenge. She wanted to fix things. No, she didn't get to have that power anymore. I would decide how this ended. No, Abigail, I said, my voice cold and final. You're not going to fix this. I'm going to fix this. I'm going to make sure you regret every second of what you've done. She stared at me, confused, her tears still streaming down her face. What do you mean? I looked her in the eyes, my resolve hardening. I'm going to ruin your life, Abigail. I'm going to take everything from you. And when I'm done, you'll be nothing. She opened her mouth to protest, but no sound came out. She knew it was over. I saw the realization dawn on her face, the fear creeping into her eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Pack your things, I said, my voice low and steady. Get out. She hesitated, looking like she wanted to beg, but the look on my face must have told her I was serious. She turned and walked to the bedroom, sobbing quietly as she packed her bags. I stood there, my heart pounding, the weight of her betrayal crashing down on me. But I wasn't done. This was only the beginning. I wasn't just going to let her walk away and start a new life. No, I was going to destroy everything she had, just like she had destroyed me. The door slammed shut behind Abigail, the sound of her exit echoing in the silence of the house. For a moment, I just stood there, staring at the door, my mind racing. The reality of the situation hit me like a tidal wave. She was gone, but this wasn't over. No, not even close. I sat down on the edge of the couch, my hands trembling, not from sadness but from the rage that still coursed through me. The fury that had consumed me when I found out about her and Robert wasn't going away. If anything, it was growing stronger. She thought she could walk out and start over. Not on my watch. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. She had to feel the weight of her choices, just like I was feeling it now. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through my contacts, stopping at a name I hadn't thought about in years. David. David was a lawyer, but more importantly, he was ruthless when it came to divorce cases. I hadn't spoken to him in a long time, but I knew he'd remember me. We'd gone through some tough times together, and if anyone could help me ruin Abigail, it was him. I hit the call button. It rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Jack. Long time no hear, man. What's up? His tone was friendly, but I wasn't in the mood for pleasantries. I need your help, David, I said, my voice tight with anger. It's about Abigail. I need to ruin her. There was a pause on the other end of the line. David knew me well enough to understand I wasn't joking. What's going on, Jack? She's been cheating on me, I said flatly, with her boss. I want a divorce, and I want to make sure she regrets every second of this. Can you help me? David let out a slow whistle. Damn, Jack. I didn't see that coming. Yeah, I can help. But you've got to be smart about this. You can't just go in guns blazing or you'll lose everything. Let's meet tomorrow, go over the details, and make sure we handle this right. Tomorrow works, I agreed, my voice cold. I don't care what it takes, David. I want her to suffer. I hear you, David said, his tone turning serious. We'll get her where it hurts. After I hung up the phone, I leaned back on the couch, my mind already working through the next steps. Abigail's betrayal had opened a door I never wanted to walk through. But now that I was here, I was going to burn everything down. She wanted to throw our life away for some sleazy office romance. Fine. She could live with the ashes. That night, I barely slept. My mind churned with thoughts of how to make her pay. I had spent years supporting her, helping her build her career, trusting her. Now, it was all for nothing. I wasn't going to let her walk away with half of everything I worked for. No way. She'd pay in more ways than one. The next morning, I met David at his office. The cold, sterile atmosphere seemed fitting for the mood I was in. He greeted me with a firm handshake and led me into his office, where a thick stack of papers sat waiting on his desk. Here's what we're going to do, David began, cutting straight to the chase. First, we're going to document everything. All the evidence you have, texts, calls, anything you can find. We'll build a case that shows not only her infidelity, but that she's unfit to walk away with anything significant. If she thinks she's getting alimony, she's in for a rude awakening. I've already got the call with Robert, I said, pulling out my phone. He practically confessed that they were together. I've also been going through our finances. There are some big expenses she didn't tell me about, dinners, trips, things she couldn't have paid for on her own. David nodded, his expression grim. Good. Keep digging. The more we have, the better. We'll hit her with everything we've got. Make it so she walks out of this with nothing. We spent the next few hours going over every detail of my marriage, what I knew, what I suspected, and what I was willing to do to ensure Abigail didn't come out of this unscathed. David, true to his reputation, was meticulous. Every angle, every potential weakness in her defense was covered. By the time we were done, I had a clear picture of the destruction I was about to unleash. You're sure you want to go through with this? David asked as we wrapped up. Once we start, there's no turning back. I met his gaze, my jaw set. She deserves it. That night, I went home to an empty house. Abigail hadn't come back, and I didn't expect her to. She had probably run off to Robert's place, thinking she could hide out there until things blew over. But I wasn't going to let her disappear into his arms. She would feel every consequence of her actions. I poured myself a drink and sat on the back porch, staring out into the yard. My mind drifted back to the early days of our marriage, when everything had been simpler. We were younger then, full of hope and excitement for the future. Abigail had been my world, and I thought I was hers. But people change. Or maybe they don't. Maybe I had just been blind to who she really was. Either way, it didn't matter now. All that mattered was what came next. The next morning, I put my plan into action. I started with her job. Robert had been too bold, too reckless. It was time to use that arrogance against him. I knew enough about the inner workings of their office to know who to talk to, where the skeletons were buried. I called in a favor from a mutual friend, someone who had seen Abigail and Robert together, someone who was more than willing to give me the details I needed. By the end of the day, I had enough dirt on Robert to cause real damage. He was married too, with kids. If his wife found out about his affair with Abigail, his life would come crashing down as well. I wasn't just going to ruin my wife, I was going to take Robert down with her. That evening, I sent Abigail a message. Meet me tomorrow. We need to talk. She responded within minutes, agreeing to meet at a coffee shop downtown. It was almost too easy. The next day, I sat at the small cafe, my fingers tapping the table as I waited for her to show up. When she finally walked in, she looked nervous, her eyes darting around the room like she was afraid of what might happen next. She sat down across from me, her hands fidgeting in her lap. Jack, she started, but I cut her off. Don't. You're going to listen to me now. She bit her lip, staying silent as I leaned in, my voice low and dangerous. You thought you could just walk out on me and leave me with nothing, that you could run to your boss and pretend like none of this mattered. She shook her head, tears welling up in her eyes. It's not like that, Jack. I made a mistake, but... No, I interrupted, my voice firm. You made a choice. And now you're going to pay for it. I'm going to take everything from you, Abigail. Your career, your reputation. By the time I'm done, you'll be nothing. Her face paled, the reality of what I was saying sinking in. She opened her mouth to protest, but there was nothing she could say. The wheels were already in motion, and there was no stopping it now. This was just the beginning. The real reckoning was still to come. Abigail sat across from me at the cafe, her hands trembling as she absorbed the weight of my words. Her face had gone pale, her once carefully composed facade now crumbling before me. I could see the fear in her eyes. She knew I wasn't bluffing. Jack, please, she whispered, her voice barely audible. You don't have to do this. I can explain. Explain what? I cut her off, leaning forward, my eyes locking onto hers. Explain how you threw away everything we built for some cheap affair with your boss. Explain how you've been sneaking around behind my back for months, making me look like a fool. There's nothing left to explain, Abigail. You made your choice. Tears welled up in her eyes, but I wasn't moved. Not anymore. I had made my peace with the end of us. Now, all that remained was ensuring she paid for what she had done. And I wasn't stopping with her. Robert, too, would feel the sting of my revenge. I'm sorry, she whispered, her voice shaking. You're sorry. I spat the words back at her. Sorry doesn't fix this. Sorry doesn't undo what you've done. But don't worry, I said, my voice low and cold. I'm going to make sure you're more than just sorry. You're going to lose everything. Her breath hitched, and I could see her fighting to hold back a sob. But I had no time for her tears. She didn't deserve my sympathy. I stood up, sliding my phone across the table to her. What is this? She asked, her voice trembling. It's a recording, I said, my voice dripping with satisfaction, of Robert, talking about how the two of you spent nights together in his office. You remember that, don't you? Abigail's eyes widened as she looked down at the phone, her hands shaking as she picked it up. I could see the panic in her face as she listened to recording, Robert bragging about how easy it was to seduce her, how he manipulated the situation to get her promoted. It was all there, his arrogance laid bare. I've already sent copies to Robert's wife, I said, watching the color drain from her face. She's divorcing him. And by the time I'm done, your reputation at work will be in the gutter too. You'll be a joke to everyone in the office. They'll know exactly how you got that promotion. No, Jack. Please, she begged, tears now streaming down her face. You don't understand. I didn't want this. I never wanted this. You didn't want this. I snapped, my voice rising. Then why did you do it? Why didn't you just walk away before you destroyed everything? She shook her head, her sobs growing louder. I was stupid, okay? I thought it was just harmless at first, just a flirtation. And then it spiraled out of control. I never meant to hurt you. I laughed bitterly. Well, you did. And now you're going to feel the consequences. She tried to grab my hand, but I pulled away. I wasn't here to forgive her. I wasn't here to give her a second chance. I had only one goal, to ruin her the way she had ruined me. She was no longer my wife, no longer the woman I had once loved. She was a stranger, someone I barely recognized. Jack, she whimpered, her voice raw. I'll do anything. Just don't destroy me, please. I stared at her, the woman who had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and felt nothing but cold, calculated rage. There was no going back now. I had already put everything in motion, and the destruction of her life was inevitable. You should have thought about that before you decided to cheat, I said, my voice flat and unfeeling. This is your mess, Abigail, and now you get to live with it. Without another word, I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving her sobbing in the aftermath of the chaos she had created. The moment I stepped outside, a wave of cold satisfaction washed over me. It wasn't enough to simply walk away. I had to ensure that every part of her life fell apart. The next morning, everything started unraveling for Abigail. The gossip had already spread at her office, rumors of her affair with Robert, the inappropriate promotion, and the way she had betrayed me. Her colleagues whispered behind her back. Her friends stopped answering her calls. She became a pariah, her career destroyed in a matter of days. And Robert? His wife had taken their kids and left him. I had sent the recording of his disgusting boasts to her as well. She filed for divorce immediately. Robert's world crumbled, his personal and professional life wrecked, and I watched it all unfold from a distance, feeling nothing but satisfaction. But I wasn't done yet. I had kept my final act of revenge reserved for Abigail's most prized possession, her future. With the help of David, my lawyer friend, I ensured that Abigail walked away from the divorce with nothing. No alimony, no assets. Everything we had built together, the house, the savings, even the car, was mine. I made sure she was left with no financial safety net. She would have to start over from scratch, alone. 2 weeks later, I found myself standing at the edge of the cliff, the wind howling around me. The place had always been a favorite of ours, a secluded spot overlooking the ocean, where we used to come to escape the world. Now, it was just another reminder of how much had changed. As I stared out at the crashing waves, my phone buzzed. I looked down to see a text from Abigail. Her words were desperate, pleading for one last chance to talk, to make things right. Please, Jack. I can't do this anymore. I'm losing everything. I just need to talk.